pull it off. Why should we trust you anyway?
Because I'm the only one standing between you and a bullet in your head.
Why are you here?
Because I want to make movies?
No.
Because I like movies?
No.
C'est une thérapie absolument sûre, certaine.
Welcome to this week's film show with film critic Lisa Nesselson and me, Eve Jackson. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Eve.
The Oscar-winning British director Steve McQueen's Widows is out in France this week. Why is it called Widows?
Oh, well, it's called Widows because 4 married guys collaborate on a heist that goes terribly wrong. All 4 men, led by Liam Neeson's Harry, die, and the $2 million they just stole goes up in flames. Bummer, because that money belonged to a scary guy who wants it back. And that scary guy sends another scary guy to impress upon Harry's widow, Veronica, played with steely flair by Viola Davis, that she has a no-nonsense deadline very soon for paying back that debt.
Well, I'm a big fan of this movie, and I interviewed the director, Steve McQueen, earlier this week. He's been praised for bringing 4 very different actresses together and bringing them meaty female roles.
Well, I think certain actresses, I mean, like Viola Davis, for example, is seen as holier than thou. And she's a real woman, you know, with emotions. She's shy, she's bashful, she's vulnerable.
She's sexual, we see in the film.
Precisely. And I think often it's the case that she's seen as some kind of messiah, in a way, or some sort of person that you sort of look up to. But really, she's a human being. And yes, I wanted to give her a life. I wanted to make her a person.
Harry Rollins. You never mess with me, I never mess with him. We in different games. I always have respect. So why'd he hit me now?
Well, I know why. Thinks you're setting your sights on something high, you getting sloppy.
These female characters rocked for me. What did you think of them?
Oh, they rocked for me, too. The acting ensemble is obviously having a blast working together, although the Chicago accents, some of them were a little wobbly. Cynthia Erivo, as the very athletic getaway driver, really knocked me out in her first major movie role. Of course, she does have a Tony, theater, an Emmy, TV, and a Grammy, music, and Elizabeth Debicki is superb as a reluctant call girl. You know, movie history has given us lots of examples of how if a certain kind of henchman threatens and tortures you until you talk, he's going to kill you anyway. So this isn't a movie for the squeamish, but unless you're a criminal or married to a criminal or in debt to a criminal, you should be able to lean back and enjoy it, I think.
And the director, Steve McQueen, has spent a career confronting the unspoken to wide acclaim. Now, he dealt with hunger striking in his debut, Hunger, in 2008, sex addiction in Shame, and the racism embedded in America's history in 12 Years a Slave, which won him an Oscar in 2013. Now, on first glance, this does seem very different to those movies, doesn't it?
A little bit, because this is a very lively action picture. There's a lot going on, but it's complex and enjoyable, although not exactly moral. It's a revenge heist story with a sufficient number of twists that you're always guessing in a fun sort of way. And it's based on a British TV series of the 1980s that I'm unfamiliar with, but obviously made a big impression on the then 13-year-old McQueen because it had tough, can-do female characters. McQueen co-wrote the screenplay, by the way, with Gillian Flynn, author of Gone Girl, and the series Sharp Objects. And it was shot on location in my native Chicago, which has a substantial African-American and Hispanic population, so it makes organic sense that the main characters, especially that female quartet of women who don't actually know each other but know they have to come together to get some money fast, should reflect that racial mix.
Well, Chicago is almost its own character in the movie, isn't it? And when I spoke to Steve McQueen, he told me that it's where he had his first solo art show, because he's also an artist, not just a director.
Absolutely, and a prize-winning one. And I believe it was one of his unbreakable conditions that, you know, they had to shoot the film on location in Chicago or he wasn't going to do it. Now, I'm from Chicago, and the director and much of the cast attended the premiere at the Chicago International Film Festival in October. Of course, the film makes excellent use of real Chicago locations, but ironically, this is not exactly the kind of story that makes you think, wow, I have got to go to visit Chicago because you can get shot at random in the street. You can get done in by political enemies. Your store can be repossessed. You can be lied to by your spouse, die a fiery death, live in constant fear and unrelenting tension. Sign me up. I'm going there. I'm here to say that it is in fact possible to get through a whole day in Chicago visiting or living without having to confront matters of life and death.
Although, as you can see in my interview, which will be on later this week, Steve McQueen actually talks about how he did extensive research into Chicago and even spent time with the FBI as well as some priests to find out about it. Moving on to our next film of the week. It's a very independent American film by Patrick Wang. Tell us about A Bread Factory.
Yes, this is also an ensemble film, but it was made on the proverbial shoestring, probably one shoe. It's a delightful tale of creativity and altruism versus the forces out to get the quirky people who for 40 years have found a home in a community center, a cultural place housed in a former bread factory, hence the name, run by two spirited older women. It makes fun of bad art's criticism, and bad faith, but it does so gently as the interlocking characters of a very varied community sell out or stand up for what they believe in. Wang, who writes his own screenplays, does something here that the late Robert Altman excelled at. He introduces lots and lots of characters, and yet it's never hard to tell them apart. So here's a visiting artist, a cranky filmmaker, who doesn't seem all that grateful for her audience.
Anyone? Any questions for the filmmaker? Anyone? What is wrong with you? What? Any questions? Who doesn't have questions? If you have a soul, you have questions. Who has a soul?
Little home away from home, here in Shackford. Come live by the river, let it carry your cares downstream.
Anyone who has a soul has a question. Is there a plot, or is this just a series of quirky vignettes?
Oh, no. This town has a limited budget for children's arts programs, and it's down to the wire for who's going to get the funding. The Bread Factory, which really needs it to go on existing, or a Chinese performance art duo called Mei Ray, who have built an incongruously radical showcase building and want to siphon all the money off. Pre-recorded applause actually accompanies this duo whenever they enter or leave a room. They're so confidently impervious to their own ridiculousness that you could call them the China in the bull shop.
Okay, well, moving on to some sad news, something that made you very sad because one of your most favourite filmmakers passed away this week. Tell us about Bernardo Bertolucci.
Well, he directed one of my 5 favourite films of all time. That would be Last Tango in Paris. And though I never spoke with him, I worked with him for 5 days in the summer of 2002 as an extra in his set in Paris in 1968 incest and revolution drama, The Dreamers. So if you look carefully, that's me 15 years ago to the left behind Louis Garrel on the steps of the Palais de Chaillot.
We can see
where
you.
the Cinémathèque Française was headquartered, and where, in Bertolucci's affectionate film, adapted from a novel come memoir by Gilbert Adair, a film-crazy and incestuous film sister and brother, film buff French sister and brother, meet an American film buff played by Michael Pitt. And here is, if you can see it, the screening invitation that's been on my refrigerator since late 2003. I think you can say that this is a European film. Get a look at that. Bertolucci, of course, started making movies in the early 1960s at a time when a higher percentage of films were destined for grown-ups than for young people, and subtitles weren't considered an obstacle for English-speaking audiences to come and see them. Bertolucci, who worked in Italian, English, and French, considered French to be the language of cinema. Sex and politics were always woven into the stories he told, which were very well-told stories. And if you lived in an urban area, it was close to unthinkable to not go out and see the new Bertolucci film the same way you'd see the new Buñuel or Truffaut or Bergman, no matter what they happened to be about. And by 1987, Bertolucci's clout and popularity were grand enough to get The Last Emperor made, sumptuously shot in the Forbidden City. It won 9 Oscars.
15 years before he won 9 Oscars, he made Last Tango in Paris right here in the city.
Okay, for those who don't know or had never seen it, it's about the unconventional arrangement between a young French woman and a middle-aged American man who meet for no strings-attached sex in an empty apartment without ever even knowing each other's names. In 1972, incredibly influential American film critic Pauline Kael compared the effect that Last Tango had at the New York Film Festival to the first performance of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. She said, quote, "Bertolucci and Brando have altered the face of an art form, and who was prepared for that?" End quote. Well, for better or worse, references to and jokes about the notorious butter scene made it into the broader culture. The movie is about so much more than that, but unfortunately, that's the part that caught on in the popular imagination.
Well, the butter scene has been subject to a lot of scrutiny. It's the scene where Marlon Brando's character, Paul, rapes actress Maria Schneider's character, Jeanne. Now, Schneider said in an interview back in 2007 that it wasn't in the original script. She didn't know about it. So the feelings that we feel while we're watching it of that she's being violated on screen are actually real.
That's true. If you've never seen the so-called butter sequence for yourself, I won't ruin it by going into more detail, but it's very intense and convincing. So they got that result. The thing is, Bertolucci and Brando didn't inform the indelible young Maria Schneider about how the scene would actually evolve. If a director was that cavalier about a sensitive physical scene now, in 2018, it would be unforgivable, absolutely. Rape, always wrong, absolutely, although no one was actually raped. In 1971, unfortunately, what went on was called making a movie. It was just par for the course. Although the act was simulated, it definitely shook her up. Her cousin recently published a book contending that it ruined Schneider's life, and the controversy overshadowed the last years of his career in a way. Kael said of Last Tango that people would probably be arguing about it for as long as there are movies, and this week we learned that's certainly true.
We certainly did, didn't we? Especially after the scene. We haven't got time to do it now. We'll just re-released in a limited edition box set in France is Bertolucci's all-star saga of class divisions and political turmoil in Italy, 1900. It stars Gérard Depardieu and Robert De Niro, and we're going to leave you with that. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.